I confessed to an emotional affair 3 weeks ago, but that's the version people can stomach. The texts, the whispered phone calls after midnight, the way I'd smile at my screen. Marcus saw all that. Everyone thinks they understand what ended us. They're wrong. My marriage was over the second I said that man's name, sure. But what terrifies me isn't the divorce papers or the empty closet, it's what comes next. The investigators. The frozen bank accounts. The look on Marcus's face when he realized those weren't just love notes they were reading. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened, especially the part that made Marcus pack while I was at my desk job. The trigger wasn't my confession. It was what he found while checking if I was telling the truth about just emotions. That's when everything really ended. The loneliness started like a whisper I couldn't quite hear. Marcus had been pulling 80-hour weeks at the hospital for 3 years straight, ever since he made attending physician. I'd come home to our townhouse in Lawrence Park, microwave something from the freezer, and eat it on the couch while staring at the spot where a husband should be. Our conversations became logistics texts about dry cleaning and grocery runs. He forgot my birthday in March, not the date, but the entire concept of celebrating it. I told myself this was the sacrifice we made for his dream, that I was supportive, not neglected. That's the lie that carried me to my new job at Reynolds & Stone, the boutique investment firm downtown. David Chen sat in the cubicle across from mine. He remembered how I took my coffee without asking, noticed when I wore a new blouse, asked about my weekend with genuine curiosity. Harmless stuff. Office neighborliness. The first time he texted me about a work project at 9 p.m., I didn't think anything of it. My phone buzzed while Marcus was sleeping, and I answered because that's what diligent employees do. The project was complicated. It needed attention. That's all it was. I told myself this for 6 weeks while our message thread grew longer than any I'd ever had with Marcus. We'd analyze client portfolios, then drift into complaining about office politics, then discussing childhood memories, then trading music recommendations at 1 a.m. The rationalizations became a mantra. We were just friends. Marcus barely spoke to me anyway. David was going through a divorce and needed support. The tiny voice warning me grew fainter each day. When Marcus asked who I was texting during dinner, the one dinner we managed to share that month, I said it was my sister. The lie tasted metallic but slipped out easy. He nodded, already checking his pager, and I felt relief flood my chest. That was the moment I should have known I was building something dangerous. But David made me feel visible. When I described the argument Marcus and I had about having kids, the same circular fight we'd been having for 2 years, David listened. He asked follow-up questions. He remembered details. One Tuesday night in May, I cried in the office parking lot after a brutal performance review, and David sat in his car next to mine for an hour, just talking through the window. That night I texted him 3 times after I got home, telling him things I'd never said aloud. Marcus was on a 36-hour shift. The house was silent. The boundary between appropriate and necessary dissolved somewhere around message 47. At the 10-week mark, I made my first truly damning choice. David invited me to lunch off campus to discuss a confidential work matter. We drove to a bistro 3 neighborhoods away, where no one would recognize us. The conversation started with client accounts, but shifted to his failing marriage, his fears about being a good father to his daughter. I told him about Marcus's emotional absence, the way I sometimes felt like a ghost in my own home. When he reached across the table and squeezed my hand, I let him. When he held it for 30 seconds too long, I didn't pull away. My skin remembered the warmth of human contact like a forgotten language. My sister Jenna noticed the change during our weekly coffee catch-up. She watched me check my phone 7 times in 20 minutes, my face doing that involuntary smile thing. "You're having an affair," she said flatly, not as a question. I laughed too loud, drew stares from other tables. "Don't be ridiculous. He's just a friend from work." The defensiveness in my voice sounded foreign, manufactured. Jenna stirred her latte, eyes locked on mine. "I've known you since you wore braces, Lee. I've never seen you light up like that for Marcus." I changed the subject to our mother's health, but her words burrowed deep. That night I almost confessed everything to Marcus, but he came home exhausted, kissed my forehead like I was a child, and collapsed into bed. The moment passed. I texted David instead. What I hadn't admitted to anyone, not Jenna, not Marcus in our final fight, not even myself until the investigators laid out the timeline, was that I'd been helping David manipulate client accounts since week 8. He'd approached me with a temporary fix for a discrepancy in the Henderson portfolio. Just a small adjustment, he explained. No one would notice. His bonus depended on it, and his daughter's private school tuition was due. I had the access codes. He had the pressure. The math felt simple. I made the change, my fingers shaking so badly I had to retype the password 3 times. The thrill of it made me nauseous and electric simultaneously. That was the real affair, the numbers, the schemes, the shared criminal secret. The emotional connection was just the gateway drug. Marcus discovered the first crack on a random Thursday when he opened our credit card statement online. A $42 charge from Le Petit Bistro appeared on a day I told him I was working through lunch. He texted me a screenshot with a single question mark. My stomach dropped through the floor. I typed and deleted 6 responses before settling on team meeting, had to order food. The lie layered on top of other lies, creating sedimentary rock of deception. He didn't reply for 3 hours. When he did, it was just okay. That okay carried more weight than any screaming fight could have. I knew he knew, or at least suspected, but I still didn't stop. The real damage compounded when I gave David our home address. He claimed he needed to drop off some documents for the project we were working on. I was so paranoid about emailing them, so I agreed. He came on a Saturday morning while Marcus was at the hospital. I met him at the door, took the manila envelope, and we stood there for 5 minutes, talking in the doorway like neighbors. Nothing inappropriate happened. Marcus came home that evening. He asked who'd been by. No one, I said automatically. He pointed to the driveway. There's a cigarette butt by the garage. You don't smoke. My mind went blank. Maybe the mailman. Marcus looked at me for a long time, his physician's eyes searching for something he couldn't quite diagnose. I felt myself disappearing under that gaze. By mid-June, I'd made my worst decision yet. David called me at 2 a.m., panicking. The audit was coming sooner than expected. He needed $20,000 immediately to temporarily balance a displaced fund. Just until next quarter, he promised. I'll have it back before anyone notices. I didn't have that kind of money, but we had a savings account, our house fund. The one Marcus and I had been building for 5 years, dreaming of a place with a yard. I transferred the money at 3:17 a.m., my thumbprint authorizing the biggest betrayal I'd ever committed. The screen confirmed the transaction, and I felt something inside me break permanently. I told myself it was a loan. I told myself Marcus would never know. I told myself David's daughter needed this. What I didn't know was that Marcus had already hired a private investigator. The emotional distance had made him suspicious long before I confessed anything. He'd placed a GPS tracker on my car and a keylogger on our home computer. While I was at work, he was collecting evidence of my affair, photographs of David and me at lunch, printouts of our text conversations, bank statements showing the transfer. He wasn't looking for proof of an emotional affair. He was looking for proof I wasn't the person he'd married. He found something far worse than flirtation. He found the fake vendor accounts I'd created. He found the spreadsheets I'd hidden in a folder named Recipes. He found the burner phone I'd bought to communicate with David about matters that couldn't be traced. When I came home on a Tuesday evening in late June, the house was unnaturally quiet. Marcus's car was in the driveway, which was unusual for 6 p.m. I called his name. No answer. I climbed the stairs, my legs heavy with dread. Our bedroom door stood open. The closet was half empty, his side gaping like a missing tooth. A single sheet of paper lay on the stripped mattress. It wasn't a note. It was a printout of an email from David to me. The Henderson account is clean. We did it. Meet at the usual spot to celebrate. Below it, Marcus had handwritten. I checked. The usual spot is a motel off the highway. The charge on our card was $89. I'm staying with my brother. My lawyer will call you. I collapsed on the floor, surrounded by the ghosts of my choices. He'd packed everything he needed in 2 hours while I sat at my desk, oblivious. The confession I'd planned to make that night, the emotional affair, the hand-holding, the feelings I'd developed became irrelevant. The truth was so much uglier than I'd prepared for. I called him 16 times. He sent one text, "Don't call me again." I gave everything to the investigators. You're on your own. The finality of those words hit harder than any punch could have. The unraveling happened in stages after that. First came the call from HR on Thursday morning, asking me to come in for an urgent meeting. Security escorted me to my desk while I packed my things. Then Jenna called, her voice cold. "Mom saw the police at your house on the news. Care to explain?" I couldn't. Then David disappeared. His phone disconnected, his apartment emptied overnight. He'd taken the $20,000, the burner phone, and every piece of evidence that could implicate him. I was left holding the entire scheme, my fingerprints on every transaction. The investigators found the manila envelope he delivered. It contained not documents, but a key to a storage unit where I'd been keeping the false records. Marcus's PI had photographed me entering it. I hadn't even realized I'd been followed. By August, I was charged with wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. My bail was set at $100,000, which my mother paid by refinancing her own home. Marcus filed for divorce citing irreconcilable differences, but the paperwork included a full statement about my criminal activities, protecting his assets from the coming civil forfeiture. I moved into my mother's guest room, sleeping on a twin bed surrounded by her porcelain doll collection, each one staring at me with blank accusation. The emotional affair became a footnote in the legal documents, just evidence of my character and judgment. The real story was the $7 million I'd helped David divert over 4 months, the fake vendors with my signatures, the offshore accounts I'd helped establish using my married name. I told myself I'd been manipulated, that David had groomed me from day one, but the investigators showed me my own texts, where I'd suggested ways to hide the transfers more effectively. I'd been an eager student. My mother, to her credit, never asked why. She just set a plate of food in front of me each night that I couldn't eat. The silence in her house was different than the silence in mine had been. This one was filled with questions unasked. Jenna stopped by once, stood in the doorway without entering and said, "Marcus is seeing someone, a nurse at the hospital." The news shouldn't have hurt. It was my fault we were through. But it did. Because even after everything, some pathetic part of me thought the emotional connection had been real on my end. That I'd risked everything for something genuine. But Marcus had moved on from the ghost I'd become, proving I'd sacrificed our life for nothing but smoke and numbers. The public dimension became its own punishment. Reynolds and Stone issued a press release nomming me as the rogue employee responsible. Newsweek mentioned me in a story about financial crimes, paired with a professional headshot I'd forgotten existed. Former colleagues posted sanctimonious LinkedIn articles about spotting fraud in your workplace. My social media accounts became archaeological sites of hypocrisy, photos of Marcus and me at his med school graduation, status updates about being proud of my hardworking husband, check-ins at restaurants where I'd been with David planning crimes between appetizers. Strangers commented on old posts, hope it was worth it. I deleted everything, but screenshots haunt the internet forever. What I hadn't anticipated was Marcus being investigated too. Because the money had passed through our joint account, even briefly, the authorities had questions about his complicity. His lawyer bills mounted. His hospital administration placed him on administrative leave pending clearance. The news that I'd effectively destroyed his career, his reputation, his trust in basic human decency, this hit me harder than my own charges. When I heard, I sat in my mother's kitchen and sobbed for 3 hours, not for myself, but for the man who'd done nothing but work himself to exhaustion trying to build a life with me. Marcus had to prove he wasn't involved. His bank records were subpoenaed, his emails searched, his colleagues interviewed about his character, all because I wanted to feel alive again. I'm telling this story now because yesterday Marcus's lawyer delivered a letter, not about the divorce, that was finalized last month. This was a personal letter handwritten. He wrote that he'd been cleared of any wrongdoing, that his life was slowly rebuilding, that he'd met someone kind and present and honest. Then he asked me to sign a final document waiving any claim to his pension. The cruelty wasn't in the request, it was in the detail that he'd found the document in my handwriting, a draft I'd created for David, outlining how to hide assets from a spouse during a divorce. I'd forgotten about it. It was in the recipe folder. Marcus had seen it months ago before I confessed anything. That's when he knew the emotional affair was just the surface. That's when he started packing. So here I am, 3 weeks after confessing to an emotional affair that was never the point, awaiting sentencing in my mother's guest room, surrounded by dolls with glass eyes. I tell myself I was lonely. I tell myself David was a predator. I tell myself Marcus's absence drove me to it. But the truth I circle around, the one that keeps me awake at 3 a.m., is simpler. I wanted to feel powerful, and crime gave me that power. The connection was never about love. It was about being someone who mattered, even if that someone was a criminal. So judge me. Tell me which betrayal was worse, the texts or the theft, the emotional distance or the falsified accounts. I don't know anymore. I just know that when Marcus packed his bags while I sat at work, he wasn't leaving a cheating wife. He was fleeing a stranger who'd been living in his home, wearing his wife's face, destroying his life one rationalization at a time. And I let him go.